Welcome to Breaking Through the Contradictions. Here, we openly discuss various contradictions and challenges that we pass on and also teach our children that, if not addressed, will impact the individual development of each child. We will explore the topic, share pertinent information, and provide ways for you and I to take action. We look forward to you joining our conversation. So let's get started. The views and opinions expressed by the guests, speakers, and participants in this context are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the organizers, hosts, or any affiliated individuals or organizations. We encourage open dialogue and diverse perspectives, but the individual viewpoints shared during this discussion are personal and should not be attributed to any collective entity involved. I just have to do that.
Hello.
Christine.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you, ma'am?
Doing good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again. And I love your backdrop.
You know what? It's a real backdrop. It's my classroom. I'm like, just don't look too close. It looks pretty good far away.
But you're a kindergarten teacher.
I am a kindergarten teacher.
I can see. I'm like, all right, nice. Classrooms are always so fun. You guys spend so much time getting them prepared and ready for each of your students. I always find it very interesting because all of you are so creative in creating these spaces, these warm and inviting spaces for the students to come into. But when I get in there, I'm like, oh, I would have never done this. Me, I've been like stark white walls and whatever, and just weird stuff. It just wouldn't have been right. So I'm not the creative teacher. I'm just about let's get it done, y'all.
I think it's kind of funny because my classroom has changed. I used to have the bright colors and I would have blue, purple, yellow, and now it's all like the farmhouse. So all my color is down on the floor, so it doesn't distract the children. And so it's more streamlined. And so I like it. I like it much better this way. So, so what are we here today to talk about, Tabitha?
I know we have lots to talk about because this one's a big one. And
Yes,
I've missed you. I'm so glad you were able to join me today because I've missed you. And my Kristen, I love me some Kristen. Don't worry, all three of us are going to be on here. But it's always really cool to have you here. Okay, so today's topic: school suspension and the associated consequences. Right?
Yes.
So it's very interesting how I came. I think I was talking this. I might have been Kristen. No, it wasn't because I sent in a message. Whatever was happening, they were talking about suspending students. And I thought this is a really good conversation to have because it is a built-in contradiction. The school suspension is meant to correct the bad behavior and put people back in line. But that is not what is happening. So therefore, that contradiction of if you do the crime and you do your time, everything can be we're able to move on. But are we really? I don't think that's what's happening. So I figure we can have that conversation, especially since you're in a classroom.
Right.
And the fact that it happens even before they come to you. Even before they come to you. I learned that they are suspending kids how many times before they even make it to kindergarten?
I know they suspend them in preschool. I think we really need to talk about that because I know that we've had some private conversations about the pipeline to prison.
Yes.
From it used to be kindergarten, and now it's pushed down to preschool. And then you have to think, Tabitha, is it because we are now suspending children in preschool where we were not suspending them before? Now, I really hadn't thought about that until this topic came up. So it might be because of that. I pulled up some statistics on that our most at-risk children are being put into the juvenile and criminal justice systems. And because of the policies that we're putting into place. And one of those are the suspensions. Children who attend schools with high suspension rates are significantly more likely to be arrested and jailed as adults. So is it working?
No,
According to the
absolutely not.
statistics, no. And I know you have some more statistics. Do you want to
Yeah.
share those?
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about that today. So I looked it up, and National Institute of Health says school suspension is used widely and affects many students, right? And begins as early as preschool. When you look at a K through 12 school career, 35% of students are suspended at least one time. This is where things go awry. Among Black students, 67% of males and then 45% of females are suspended. That is, first of all, that's gross, disgusting. And when you say, as a school educator, there is no bias and the things are not happening and this is not real, that is not true. The numbers don't lie. Now, that being said, at the end of the day, what is the outcome you're looking for with those suspensions? Because if you are looking for the outcome we are currently receiving, then you are receiving the outcome you want. And therefore, that financial windfall is working for you and hurting the rest of us. So when we look at it, 3 million students each year in the United States are suspended, right? Out of school suspension, okay? And suspension affects minorities and students with disabilities at a higher rate than their peers. Disgusting.
Yes.
I'm just saying that's not cool.
Right.
When you look at it again, so school suspension being widely covered, this was the 67%. Let me explain. It increased in prevalence beginning with the 1994 Federal Gun-Free Schools Act, which mandated that schools adopt zero tolerance policies that punish students who have weapons in schools with at least 1 year suspension. Subsequent zero tolerance policies at state and local levels mandated suspension for possession of illegal drugs. I get it. Possession of over the counter drugs, including, this is the part, including ibuprofen and cough drops, and subjective offenses such as insubordination. Okay, ibuprofen, girls need those at least once a month. So I'm gonna need y'all to settle down. And what the heck is a cough drop? What are we doing? Why is a cough drop a problem? I don't know. I'm just curious.
I know it's so weird. It didn't used to be like that because I remember I used to be sent to school with cough drops, but you can't be sent, I can't even have my children have them because they're, passing them out like candy sometimes. So we have
Come
to
on, tastes
collect
like candy.
that and we can't have, then I have to call the parents and then all of that. They can go through the nurse. They could give their ibuprofen to the nurse. I don't know if it's like that in all states, but I think you might need a doctor prescription or something like that. I know at least that we would need something like that. But it's I'm going to go back to a statistic that you had mentioned.
Yes.
And it is about the Black males and the minorities and special ed students.
Yes.
We are doing a huge disservice. When that happens, we need to be looking at how we are handling the situations and if we are being fair and equitable as teachers and also as administrators. So each time that if a child is suspended, that needs to be looked at. The demographic part of it needs to be looked at. I know that we have Department of Education comes in and they take a look. DOE, and they take a look at our statistics. And if we are not right on the demographics and who we're suspending, they come in and they look at our data very carefully, and we have to answer to why that is happening. So obviously something needs to change.
Yeah, but wait a second. What is looking at the numbers going to do? Unless you make a change, I can look.
So
I
they
looked at
started
cakes and
looking.
cookies all day.
Sure. So we started doing some restorative justice practices in our schools. And so a lot of the teachers were getting training on that to make sure to help ensure that we were meeting the needs of all of our students. We are still suspending. Um, I think that we could discuss further some alternatives to suspensions because obviously we just talked about it. It's not working.
It's not.
And we need to figure out what we can do differently to help meet the needs of all of our students, not just a certain segment of our population. Um, so both of us have children that have special needs,
Yes.
and you are a minority, so this hits you twice. If you think about that, it hits twice as hard,
Yep.
which is not right. So we
I was known in the school for one kid, but not known in the school for the other. So I had two in the school. I mean, they travel, together sort of. So one would go in first, the second one will follow. They would move together for a little bit, and then they would split again and then meet up again. But the one when she would go in, no more people, they knew I existed. I filled out the paperwork. I did what I was supposed to do. So she was the what I would consider the average child, right? And that no one really knew. They didn't see me that often. But when the second one showed up, and that's a sped kid, but you now everybody knows me because now I'm down there. But I
Right.
will share that the one time I did, I love the fact that you were commenting on Save Our Kids, and where you mentioned that the parents should tell the school of the challenges that you're having and some of the ways that they can help, that our information can help them overcome some of the challenges that they would have when they're at school.
Right.
Well, for my situation, I did inform them. I was like, hey, please don't put my child in a classroom that is not very, very structured by the teacher, right? I need that person to be very similar in strength and tolerance as I am. And it either needs to be a man or it needs to be a woman who's strong enough, but it can't look like somebody he can go to school with. So each year we go through this, and I know sometimes you can't always do that. However, we have been working that model that haunts his whole entire school career. We get to a certain point, and somebody in their infinite wisdom decided that parent doesn't know what she's talking about, and therefore we're not going to listen to her. And what they did was they placed him in with a person, a young lady, and that went horribly, horribly wrong, right? Because I was about to sue the district. Let's be very clear, because they put him direct line of danger because she did not know how to control him and another student, and that student had my kid in a headlock because of her direction. And when I came in and I sat down, they called me in for this meeting. I came in and sat down. I'm sitting next to this person, right? I didn't know who it was. I thought it was a child. I thought it was another student in the school. And I stand up and she stands up and we're going. I was like, okay, who are you? And it turns out she was his teacher. And once I recognized that, all the pieces started to make sense. But the point is that he was going to be suspended for things that he didn't have control over, but she had 100% control over. So you put him in the line of fire for him to be exited out. And I don't understand why we would do that.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think
Go
you
for it.
hit the nail on the head as far as from a parent point of view. You know your child.
Mm-hmm.
You said what you needed was X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
For your child to be successful. You
Yes.
know your child. The school should say, that this is going to be okay. The school did not listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at this teacher and you go, I know that this is not going to work.
Yep.
And yet they did it anyway. And so I've been there as a parent. I know exactly what you're talking about because I've done the same thing too. And I look across, I'm like, well, duh, don't you guys know what you just did? So it was at that moment, I think it's on the school.
Yes.
It's not on the child. I'm like, give them a different teacher and try something else. but don't keep doing this because you're going to get suspensions.
Yes.
So um that's a concern. So that would
Mhm.
be like one part of the solution, right?
Right.
So what happens if we
Wait,
have
before we go into the solutions, let's talk about some of the consequences of the
okay,
suspension, because I
okay.
think that people are like, but suspensions, they have to work, right? No, they don't. The way that these are set up, it was originally set up to remove the violence, the
Mhm.
guns, the drugs, and things like that in the school. Look at where we were in 1994, and then look at where we are in 2024. Okay. There is, this is worse than it
Mhm.
was when they initially put that in place. So, does that mean that suspension is working, or is it failing, or is it working for the benefit of those who are cashing in on the tragedy that exists because of it? So, that's one. I noticed that right away. That is one thing that's bothersome to me, right? But when they look at it, so I'm looking at this and they say, here is a closer look of some of the unintended consequences of suspension: lack of trust, um, loss of learning and sinking grades. Students lose about so parent inconvenience, achievement gaps. You know, you have those as some of them. And then many schools are taking on the challenge of having circle discussions, early warning indicators, support programs, access to mental health services, peer mediation, partnering. All of these are supposed to help, but somehow or another, they're still not helping. And we're still running in the same problem. Every time you suspend a child, you're pretty much saying that, you know what, I just don't have time to manage whatever is happening. But the child is always responding to something that is happening. I think that we should look at each individual situation and figure and ask a question instead of automatically assuming that child wants to be in that position. For example, when you talk about the this, everybody knows about the one where the parents are on trial now for their child taking a gun and killing 4 people. I
Mhm.
do believe that they should be. This is correct. Okay, it's time to set an example. Parents, we control a lot of the behaviors that our children have when they're responding to bad behaviors. In this situation, for this one specifically, the fact is that he exhibited behaviors that let you know something was wrong. But instead of someone asking what exactly is wrong and why are you doing this, and why is everything you write so graphically violent? Yes. Instead, they bought him a gun, because in their minds they only seen one side of the story of potentially him being bullied or whatever was going on with him, and they didn't respond. So now, so yes, they wanted to take him home. The school called and says, you need to take him home. No, we're not going to take him home, he can stay here, right?
Right.
And then he went off to kill, and a couple hours later he went and killed some people, some other students. That's letting you know something's wrong. So stop. We need to start asking a question versus just automatically thinking suspension is going to help. So I have somebody who's here that says, um, suspensions work for what the system intended them to do: condition the troubled child. So you're pretty much putting them in a position that that's going to be their trajectory. So if I do this, I will have the ability to go out and play with my friends who are on the corner on the block doing the block things, and then I can be a part of that, right? And
Right.
because that's where I want to be. Instead, I don't want to be in school where people restrict my thoughts and won't allow me to do what I want to do and things like that. I just feel like we're not asking the right questions, and the suspension is once you commit the crime, you're forever that criminal, and that can't be that way. That's why the school to prison pipeline works so well.
I would strongly agree with you on that too. Um, it we have to do better, and it is does design what we intended it to do. We are ostracizing children because we then say that they are suspended. Everybody has. sometimes, like even as a parent or as teachers, sometimes we have more patience than other times. So
Mhm.
does it have to do? It has to do with a myriad of things. It could be that we're like, nope, we don't have time for this today. I really need a break. Um, and that we're just like, nope, I'm not going to do it. Um, it could be the same thing that they have been doing previously.
Mhm.
Um, so one of the things that I take a look at too is that um, I rarely contact my principal for behaviors, rarely, and the reason why is because as a teacher, I feel it's my duty to handle things internally. So I go through a lot of different things, like talking to the student. I give them breaks. They do deep breathing. I try like exercises and that type of thing, and a lot more other strategies before you know before I yeah, sometimes I'll call a parent, but I've done all of those things. I'm like, hey, I've done X, Y, and Z. What can we do? So we really need to start really working together to try to negate this, because obviously it's not helping, and it is affecting our children's self-esteem. Not only that, I did not hear you mention anything about the social and emotional aspects of
Not that.
suspensions, because the more that the children are suspended, the less they are with their peer group. The less they are with their peer group, the more that they do not belong. The more that they do not belong, the more that we have these repeated types of things, because guess what? They don't really care. They have no buy-in, and they just don't care. So we have to do better, because what happens is that suspension can lead to another suspension, which leads to another suspension.
Mhm. And it just continues from there. And like we said,
Right.
we got one person that says when they would get suspended, they would get more trouble while suspended. So it's leading into that. So
Yes.
all you're doing is you're helping them hone the skill of being suspended and being excommunicated from whoever's going to keep them in line. Because let's
Mhm.
be honest, when you look at the student body, they all break up. They break up into these little cliques or
Yes.
into these little groups, right? And
Mhm.
with that being said, what ends up happening is that now they form these little communities. Then those communities, and my children have confirmed it, those communities actually keep them straight or help them
Yes.
derail.
Yes,
So they do. Because she said, my daughter, I was like, I'm so confused. It's like what I say doesn't matter until you talk to your friends. She says our friends don't allow us that if they're on a trajectory that's going to improve their lives and we're on a trajectory where it's going to derail ours, they tell us right away. That's not smart. You might want to change that because we're not going to tolerate that. So our communities, they are building their small little pods of communities and they're learning how to navigate those communities. And inside those spaces, they have built-in consequences. If you are going to do drugs, in a community where drugs are not readily used, they're going to tell you this is not something that's acceptable. So therefore, I need you to not. You either don't do it with us, or you can't be around it. You have they've set the boundaries, and then they have to adhere to those. Children are teaching us what they need, but we believe that we know better because 50 years ago it worked like this. That's not how this works anymore. It works differently. And now it's time for some of the solutions to come into play, because I'm looking at the fact that how do you suspend somebody from for preschool? Those little people are coming from home where couple things. One, they're either the only child there, or two, they're jockeying for position because they are the baby and everybody's treating them badly or whatever. So they're biting, they're kicking, they're fighting, at home. And when they come to school, they have to learn not to do that, right?
Yeah.
So you have to figure out how to stop them from biting. You have to figure out how to teach them their kindergarten skills. Be nice, be calm, be respectful, all these things. But you can't do that if you suspend them. You just put them back into the hot pot so that they can go
Right.
figure out how to be better, how to be a better criminal, or how to be a better biter.
Well, I mean, like what I just heard you say was a very important word, was teach. So as teachers, we have the responsibility to not only teach academics, but also teach the social emotional components, and to help them become well rounded individuals. That is our responsibility as a teacher. Um, it's also the parents' responsibility to help their child become well rounded individuals, so that way they can be successful.
Yes. I think, but everybody, so again, back to the parent one being home. Parent two is the school. Parent three, the bonus parent being the community, right? Because everybody has a bonus parent. We all have one other person that we go to, right? Your mom's not available. We got to go
Mhm.
to auntie somebody or whatever. It's a bonus. That
Yeah.
bonus section is going to be your community. And we have to be willing to lean on each other in order to help overcome this. But there is no benefit to putting a child out on the street um, because they were bad in school or uncontrollable in school. I think we should get to the root cause of the problem and stop inconveniencing society. It's not just an inconvenience to parents, it's an inconvenience to all of us. Why do I say that? Parents are at work, and some of them are not on, they're not salaried employees. So if they don't work, they don't get paid. They don't get paid, they can't feed their children and themselves. So that becomes a problem. So when you suspend and send home, where are they going to place that child? Because they have to go to work. So that's one problem right there, and
Right.
we have to resolve that. They're not sending those students to school just because they're just, some people are using them as babysitters. I get that, but not, this is not that, and so you can't do that. I think I I I, I am who I am, but I believe that military like strong military like men and women being able to lead alternative suspensions and school suspension, which disrupts their entire structure that they were originally on, and it takes them away from their friends in one way, but allows them to be like a looking glass, kind of looking out to see this is where your friends are over having fun, but meanwhile you are in this structured space, more structured than normal because you don't know how to behave. I think that they should not send the students home anymore. I think that they should put them in school suspension. I believe that the person that should run in school suspension should be a male or a very strong female. And I mean in personality. I do not mean in body type or in strength. I'm talking about there's very strong personalities that are actually able to get children to pay attention and get in line. And I think potentially might be more in line of like an ROTC program or something to that effect in order for them to get their education, but then get their critical, independent, and structured learning underneath the same roof as their counterparts. And then
So
I feel like they will help to solve some of this.
I would also say that a social worker needs to be involved in that mix, for the fact that they need to get to the heart of the matter and to figure out how that they can reassimilate back into the general population, because we don't want to keep them there, for all the way through their school years. We want to make sure that they can go ahead and enter back into the general ed setting. Um, but they do need structure. But one thing is that we need to make sure that all avenues have been checked off before we do that, before we put them in a very restrictive environment. I knew of a student that was a special ed student, and they were thinking about putting them into the best program. They would have been eaten alive, but they had a lot of behavior issues, that they could not meet in the general ed setting. That goes also back to what you said. They didn't put them in the right kind of classroom for that child's needs. So I think that needs to be looked at first before we go, yep, let's go ahead and put them over into this classroom because they're this kind of student. So that's something that I think about. They need to be able to know that if when they go in that they can achieve this X, Y, and Z, and that they can go ahead and get back into the general ed setting.
I can see that. I can agree with that. I'm kind of having a hard time wrapping my head around child psychology, as child psychologist, only because if you look at all of the child psychologists right now that are helping with foster care and everything that's happening, those kids have already probably run into one at some given point in time, depending on where they live and what's going on at home. And then will they have enough space to be able to do that? Because there are a number of children who need support. Because there's one area that I know they have over 7,000 homeless children in their school district that they have to help manage. And that caseload can be extremely overwhelming for a psychologist to try to figure out what is going on and why children are going this direction. But I
So
also think there needs to be levels to the in-house suspension.
correct. This one is more like social. So our social worker, what they do is they're getting small groups together so that way they can pull out. I could see a social worker taking students, let's say that they keep on hitting instead of using their words, and they just keep on fighting and they fight and they fight, and that's what's causing it. Well, why not take that group of students and work with them on very specific skills so that way they can help reduce those suspensions and help reduce the likelihood of that occurring. Um, and having very poignant conversations with them and asking questions. Why are they doing this? Because I
Yes.
think way too often we assume
Yep.
that this is why the student is doing that, but we never give them a chance to say why.
No. And I'm going to say, because my nephew was a biter. But every time we would come, so he was being bit. No, his sister was the biter. He was the receiver, but then his response was to bite back.
Uh-huh.
And so so when I was picking him up, I was like, what is happening? What are we doing here? And I found out that um it was siblings. Their siblings. She was biting him because when he came back, he had things that she didn't have. So her response to what he had was to take it, and then when he attempted to get it back, she would bite him, and she would break the skin. If you would have seen it, they should have removed her from the household. That's how bad the bites were,
Oh.
right? But the thing was is that I didn't lash out initially. When I learned it, I started to pay attention and figure out what was happening. And so what I started doing, as a family, what we started doing was every time we would drop him back off with his mom, we would drop him off with 2 bags, right? So we would drop him off with, if we bought him food to take home, we would give him one and say, this one is for your sister, please give it to her, right? And then we were able to start curbing how she was attacking him. Now, I say that because we're talking about some of the little ones who are getting suspended. And the number one and the primary reasons why I've ever heard people suspending a young person has been for biting and hitting.
So
Number 1 and 2.
I'm going to chime in with you because I have a biting story.
Go
So I was a foster mom. I don't know if you knew that or not. And I ended
ahead.
up adopting out of the foster care system.
Nice.
And my son was a biter. I was like, I'm going to teach you how to talk. He couldn't talk. So children that cannot talk and they cannot communicate, they're going to bite. Do you know what? He never bit me. So, because I taught him how to talk, and I taught him, and I spent all my time because with him and teaching him things, and my biological child, we sat down with him and we worked, and we got him to where he was able to talk, and there alleviates the frustration.
Because
So,
they are frustrated. That is why they're
yes,
biting. And
yes.
that's what, so I can't remember being 2. I can't remember being 3 or anything like that. I can't remember being
Uh-huh.
5, right? I can't remember those time periods. But so I can't go back to why would I bite? But
Mhm.
why do I lash out? Because it's the same difference. So if I'm lashing out out of frustration because
Mhm.
I'm not being seen, or I'm not being heard, or I'm not being listened to. So those are reasons why. And that is actually part of the suspension. A part of that, the suspension actually, it actually makes the situation worse.
Yeah,
it,
I
it
would agree.
exacerbates everything at that point, because now you confirm that nobody cares enough to ask, why am I hurt, or why is this hurt person hurting people, right? You don't ask the question, and because you didn't ask, now you're alienated, and now you're saying, now I'm all alone, they don't really care about me, so I'm just going to wreck everything in my sights for whatever. Or you just go, for me, I've gotten suspended multiple times. To my defense, though, you back a cat in the corner, what's going to happen? Pity pat pat pat, and that's what happens, right? You don't.
Mhm.
That's what
Yeah.
happens. But I had exhausted all of my options to this point, and so I was afraid of the suspension. I didn't want to be suspended, right? I was so afraid my mom is going to be
Mhm.
so upset with me. This is so bad. This is not going to be okay. But for me, because I had already gone through all of the steps to letting people know, this is what I'm dealing with, and I need you to help me not have to deal with this on a regular basis. Because if I was another type of kid, I would have went in the front door and out the back and not gone to school, because I was being bullied relentlessly for no reason, right? Oh, I'm sorry. It was for a reason. I was too tall. I was taller than many of the students in the room. So they would just bully me relentlessly. But my point was, is that, I mean, maybe things could have been different. I would have done it differently, right? But I stayed. And because I was following the rules that they have outlined for us, I did that. And because once I got to the end of that strip and the same behavior was still there and everybody knew about it, but just watched it, I retaliated. And when I retaliated, my retaliation was violent enough that it gave me the gift of suspension.
Yep. Oh
That's
my
simple.
god. The gift of suspension.
The gift of suspension. But I didn't take. But I went home. I did my homework. I did the work they outlined that I had to do. I was going to miss for those 3 days. My mom talked to me about, the things that I did right, and what are some of the things that I could have done different or better. You know, those are the
Right.
things we went through. But at the end of the day, I had a goal for my adult life that I wanted to realize. And so as a child, I knew what I wanted my adult life to look like, and I knew it wasn't behind bars. So I knew suspension, in the time period I was at, I knew suspension was going to, I don't know how I knew that, could potentially make it possible for me to visit jail often at that point, because if I fell into the wrong crowd, that's
Right.
where I was going to be.
Right. And I think the suspensions, like we had talked about, there are peer groups because you keep on getting suspended. You're not going to be with the peer group that helps guide you in the right directions, that tells you, you shouldn't be doing X, Y, or Z. You're going to get yourself into trouble. You're also not going to have that positive self talk, and you're not going to be able to problem solve. Oh, I'm just a bad kid anyway. I'm just going to get
Yeah.
into trouble, instead of saying, oh, kind of putting a stopper in there, saying, I'm really not like this. I got to get my act together, and, I'm heading in the wrong direction. Um,
Right.
so, and I also was thinking about, we didn't really talk about environmental factors. We just kind of talked about, like, I would say, like, bad behaviors, or like kind of like bad, I don't want to say bad kids, because I don't think there are bad kids. I would say, you know, there's everybody has situations and circumstances. So, I think about some of the children that I've had in the past, or just thinking about what their home life might look like if they're sharing a bedroom with siblings. Okay, so their siblings are keeping them up. How are they going to be presenting in class? They're going to be tired and cranky.
Okay.
And so when you're tired and cranky, you're going to want to pick that fight, right? Leave me alone. Don't touch me. Or start fighting them. And is it really like them, or is it their situation? I'm not giving an excuse, but then we need to come to, we talked about this, the core. What is happening at the core, and how can we solve that problem?
Yeah, I'm glad that the first step is always to ask the question why. You feel as though you don't have time to figure out. So if you have 30 students in your classroom and you have 5 that are acting out, and they just take turns, one's on Monday, one's on Tuesday, and onward, right? So you don't have time to spend to figure that stuff out. And so I understand saying I need to concentrate on the 25 that are ready instead of the 5,
But
all the way up into a point, right?
Tabitha, I'm going to tell you something. As a teacher, and I've been teaching over 30 years, that is a huge mistake if teachers do not figure out your 5 children, because I'm going to tell you what happens. That 5 turns into 6, then turns into 7, because you're looking at higher percentages. The other thing is that if you take a minute or 2 and you get down on their level, or stand up on a chair to get up on their level, however you need to do it, you need to talk to them and
Yes.
say, what is going on? I notice that you're having a hard time today. That's
Mhm.
showing compassion and caring, and it's opening
Yes.
up the doors. And guess what you just did?
Yes.
You just deflated a huge situation that can potentially escalate to, guess what? A
Yep.
suspension.
Yes.
And then,
So,
do you know what goes along with suspensions, Tabitha, for
well,
teachers?
paperwork.
Paperwork. Calling parents, going to the office, paperwork. When I ask a 2-minute question or showed compassion,
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Save
have
you time.
I don't have paperwork.
No paperwork.
No, and I very rarely have paperwork.
I like that. I get it. I don't agree. I was told by a teacher, and we shall keep the names. We will keep the names a secret to protect the guilty. So, I was told that I don't have time to deal with 5 students that are out of pocket. I have to worry about the 20 that are not, that are right in line. So everybody else, they can go kick rocks. I don't really care about those kids anymore. And I'm saying to myself, why are you in a classroom? Because if that was a teacher for one of my kids, I would have snatched them out of that class and out of that school with the quickness, because there is no you I I care who my child is sitting next to in class. You know why? Because if they're cheating off of her paper, that's a disservice to them. If she's cheating off of their paper, that's a disservice to her. The problem is the conversations and the communications that the children have amongst each other condense them to do things that are not okay, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had a student just the other day that was spiraling downward very quickly. So what I did, I was like, nope, that child's going to be tutoring. So I gave that child a responsibility to tutor another student. Guess what happened?
To settle down.
It settled down because they were made to feel important, and they are important, but I did not feed into them being a bad student, calling home, and then watching that cycle go spiral.
Right. So I appreciate you as a teacher, and Kristen too, because you're still in the classroom and she's left the classroom, and I know so many other teachers who have left the classroom, and we're going to begin to start looking at some of these other teacher podcasts, because they're actually I ran across one that was actually starting to share some of the teachers' experiences, because so many people are like, it's the teacher, it's the teacher, it's the teacher. I'm here to tell you, even when I'm incorporating keeping your kids safe, yes, it is the teachers. Yes, it is the principal. And yes, it is the student. Everyone contributes to whatever outcome, whatever negative outcome that is being experienced and realized is everybody participates in that. Every single person, because a child has a mind of their own, they have personality of their own, and they want what they want. And unfortunately, we are thinking, no, because not my child. I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't have that. I do not have that in my. They're like, not my child. I was like,
Right.
nope, I can't say that. I
Yes.
didn't see them.
Yep.
I need proof it's not my child. I'm not saying that you're guilty. You have to prove yourself innocent. What I'm saying is that I am unaware of where your value systems lie when you are no longer with me. So therefore, I have to assume to a certain degree that you may be out there doing something outside of the parameters in which I taught you. So I have to be respectful of the other adults that come to me and say, your son, your daughter is doing X, Y, and Z, which is not in alignment with our mission and vision for their lives. So, how do we overcome that? That is actually a really good, that is, I suggest that to be one of the options that you use instead of suspension. So, as we begin to as we're wrapping up now, I just want to go ahead and provide you've provided some solutions that you use, and I've provided some of the things that I've had to do for myself. But when it comes down to suspension, Houston ISD currently, right now, people were so upset with the new superintendent because they felt as though he was taking away the libraries in the schools. Because he says there are no more suspensions. You guys were suspending kids consistently. That's because, oh, you're not going to sit down, you're being insubordinate, suspension. Oh, you have this problem, you can't get here on time, suspension. So they were suspending kids like unnecessarily. And what he started, I think, I didn't see the numbers. I'm just going by just some of what I see and hear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from me, if you look at the data and it shows you that all these children continue to be suspended and the absenteeism is right in line with it, he was like, no more. You're losing education because you're putting the kids out of the building. So, nope, keep the kids in the building. I applaud him for that. Keep the kids in the building, put them in a space in which they can still be educated, and you force them into a structured environment. Because guess what? If you don't get them structured now, what, K through 12, you will end up with unstructured adults who do not know how to go out and find a job, do not know how to follow the instructions of the employer. You will find people who will not be able to keep a job for that reason. So my recommendation for suspension is stop sending them home. They don't need to go home. Stop sending them home. Go ahead and put them in the building and teach them still, because you have to teach them that there are other options, and your current circumstances does not have to be your forever home. You can choose a different home. You can choose a different experience, but you have to be present and available to take on the lesson. So those are the suggestions I have. You can share your suggestions before we go ahead and wrap.
Well, we need to make sure that we are holding the students accountable for their actions. So it is making sure that they're doing restitution for their actions. So if they, defaced a part of the building, then they need to spend the time and clean it up. That means that the parents need to be aboard, and everybody, and the teachers and the administration needs to be aboard that is an okay thing to do, is to fix their mistakes and natural consequences. Restorative chats is another wonderful way to go ahead and help with helping with the suspensions as an alternative to it. So then that way they can have the opportunities to repair the harm, because it is our primary job is to teach. And if we are suspending, we are not teaching. We're taking that component away, and that opportunity away from the student as well as ourselves. And if they don't have the restorative component to it, they're going to be making the same mistake again. So you're going to suspend them, and they're just going to repeat it too. So we really need to be asking our students the questions. Can you tell me how? Was this a good choice or a poor one? So you can start to get them, talking and getting the communication open. Skills coaching. So then that way, and that's kind of what I was talking about with the social worker working and that kind of thing. So talking about teaching and modeling a socially appropriate replacement skill. there could be a skills trainer in there, somebody that could be helping them, making sure that they are learning it and how to apply it to new situations. So they might, you might go over it just a little bit with the previous one, but we need to make sure that they are able to generalize it into other areas, home, the community, and back into their school, so that way they can be successful.
Yeah.
And that takes time.
Yes, very much so. And I appreciate that. I like the restorative part of it, because if you make a mess and you're not made to clean it up, you will continue to make the mess because you don't understand the impact or the irritation or the consequence of that, because somebody else is able to take over. So I feel as though that is a very, very good component of that, and I missed it. So I'm glad that's why there's two of us, right? So we have different options to do that, and I believe that that's what happens. And when you get sentenced, right? If you have do a crime, they set a certain dollar amount that you are set to return back to whoever you harmed within that crime. Mm-hmm. So it's the same difference. And if you teach them early enough, you will actually make the difference in that student's life. And I feel like that's the best thing for us all to do. So
great.
So Christine, I think that we're going to have to circle back to this conversation again, because I think that the next time we might circle back, we might just break it down a little bit, because we're going to take a look at potentially what are so where are the areas their parents can help with this? Because right now we focus a lot on the schools on this side of it. But I believe that a child I believe we all have 360 degrees of self, right? So there's 360 ways we're going to see one situation. I think that we all have to participate. So if you look at that, that means we fit into a gear with one another, whether that's parents, teachers, and the student. And we're all working for the improvement of that child. Mm-hmm. So I do believe we need to circle back to this again and say, okay, parents, now it's your turn. It's now time for you to take responsibility for your child being suspended, or the consequences that you have to take on, because it's not just about them. And what's in it for you? First of all, this disgusting question. I hate that question, by the way. What's in it for you is that you have peace. There will be 100% peace, because you won't have to worry about, well, where do I place this child because I have to go to work or things like that. So we'll circle back for that one.
I think that sounds great.
So this has been a great conversation, Christine.
Thank you. I always enjoy it, Tabitha. I'm glad to be back after being gone for just a little bit of time.
That's all right. We understand and we appreciate you no matter what. So I thank you very much for your conversation. And again, our topic today was about suspension and the consequences of it. So same time, same channel next week. We'll be back. Remember, words are power. Please remember to use them wisely. Thank you for your time today. We appreciate the support and look forward to you visiting us again next week. Same time, same place. Until then, words are power. Please remember to use them wisely. If you have an interest in discussing a contradiction or would like to be on our live show, please let us know and send us a direct message.